Welcome into a Monday edition of Set the Screen. I'm your host, Justin Phan, joined as usual by Byron Keech and John Raudebaugh. 7-game slate, which these days is a respite for us when we're looking at 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, and 12s for the foreseeable future. So relatively tame. Welcome into all the free users, free viewers that we have in today. We're just a public show. And, kind of want to go through a little bit again of what we do here, what we offer. I think the bread and butter of what we do here is our projections. We'll throw that up on the screen, John, a little bit of accountability here of how the props have been doing. About 7% ROI so far. Had a bit of a rocky start. We're kind of building the plane as it was in midair, and then we kind of tighten the the models a little bit. We have found a good little rhythm, and projections have been performed pretty well as of late. Minutes have been great. So yeah, that's what we do. We are offering player prop projections for every player every day, making changes throughout the day to the minute to account for all news, injuries, rotation and lineup information that we get. Want to also, John, highlight our news. We have a private Discord just for our users where we're putting out news alerts, I think faster than anybody else out there. We are very careful in curating this to just show the information that you guys will need. No alerts on, 8th, 9th men in the rotation a day before. So just every single piece of good information there. And we're filtering out the noise as well. We got some, reports we'll get into earlier about the Houston guys just being present at shoot around. I think there's a lot of nuance there that, is needed. You'll see the report we put on Jaw this morning at shoot around. A lot more detail there than you would expect. We have percent play that will update throughout the day, our best prognostication on a percent chance of a player going. So if a player, misses shoot around, we'll bump them from, 50 to 40%, 50 to 45%. That'll get updated throughout the day based on our leans, based on the information that we get from shoot around, pregame media availability, pregame warmups, etc. We have an alpha community as well for all our members where we're in there, the three of us, from the start of the day to the end of the day, whether it be answering questions, sharing edges, discussing props that we like, discussing situations that we want to stay away from, just giving a lot more color to the props. I think with NBA, there's a lot more, nuance that is involved more than any other sport, just with the ranges of outcomes, the variance in rotations from night to night, Steve Kerr and the Warriors being chief among them. We got a couple contenders coming for Kerr's crown. But yeah, just we're in there as well. And then these shows, we do them 3 times a week. We are, kind of talking through all the key news and information at the top. And then we'll get into the edges in the second half of the show that we like when projections release to premium members around 4:30 Eastern. So we are here every day, grinding these projections. This weekend we had a game, I think at like 1 p.m. Eastern. We're up at 8 a.m. local, just grinding projections, getting those minutes out. So we'll get into the conditional stuff a little later. John will highlight that in a bit, but kind of want to start this show kind of how we traditionally do, is running through the key injuries and new situations of the slate. So we'll start in Philly. Paul George, Kelly Oubre, both questionable today. We'll start with Paul George. So Paul George missed 2 games in January with left groin tightness. He popped up on the injury report today with left groin soreness. So with Paul George, we obviously have a history here of him missing time recently with a groin injury. Obviously, this Philly team is in full kind of tank mode. Joel Embiid shut down for the season. No real reason to push Paul George. Tyrese Maxey we'll get into a little later, just with his finger, his ailment. Nick Nurse has said they're going to keep Paul George and Maxey in the lineup for now, health permitting. But I think that changes like fairly soon, where I think the priorities clearly emerge. This is a lost season for them. They've been hampered by injuries with Joel Embiid, Jared McCain, a host of others. So yeah, we do expect Paul George to miss here. Like we said, has history with this groin injury, has missed 2 games in January. No real incentive for them to push him today. Kelly Oubre added to the injury report this morning with illness, and we know historically, same day illness downgrade has been sub 30% in terms of a player's likelihood to play over the database that we have over the last couple seasons. So would expect Kelly Oubre to sit out as well. So who does that leave left? So if both Paul George and Kelly Oubre sit out, we have a conditional set of projections up on our site for our members. You can toggle either of them out, both of them out. There's 4 sets of Philly projections there for you to peruse. So in the situation that both of them out, we're projecting Tyrese Maxey, Quentin Grimes, Justin Edwards, Gershon Yabusele, and Andre Drummond to be the 5 starters, with their bench being Jared Butler, Ricky Council, Lonnie Walker, Jeff Doughton, and Adem Bona. So let's talk about what that looks like if both these guys are out. Obviously, Tyrese Maxey, traditionally the head of the snake, the leader in usage, the go-to guy here, but he's been dealing with this hand finger ailment that has really hampered his ability to shoot from the perimeter, especially. There have obviously been comments from Nick Nurse as of late with them, figuring out different grips, different alternatives, but it's clearly affecting his shot. That game in New York, where they almost came back and won, they were kind of daring him to shoot, and he was missing all of them. I think he went 0 for 9, 1 for 10, something like that from 3. And a lot of them weren't even close. So Tyrese Maxey, he's going to play, but he is clearly not 100% with that finger. Who does that leave? So the 2 that stand out here, the first being Quentin Grimes. I think he's the obvious go-to option here with Paul George and Kelly Oubre questionable, with Maxey hampered. We saw him drop a career-high 44 on Saturday, 31% usage. You look at who's left if these 2 are out. You have Maxey, not 100%. You have a very limited offensive duo in Yabusele and Drummond. That leaves Quentin Grimes and Justin Edwards on the wing. So those 2 I really want to kind of focus on. I think Grimes will be the go-to guy today that you want to look at, especially with Maxey hampered. I also want to talk about Andre Drummond too. So Andre Drummond, his starts have been 29 minutes and 20 minutes the last 2. I think we'll see a lot closer to 29 today if George and Oubre sit. The reason being that Yabusele would have to play a lot more at the 4 today than at the 5. They would go with Drummond and Adem Bona mostly at the 5 if those 2 end up missing. So Andre Drummond, want to shout him out. I think, he has that 27, 28, 29 minute ceiling if these 2 are out. I think he's definitely going to play 25, 26 at least to match Donovan Clingan. So Philly, want to toss it to SBK first. General thoughts on the Sixers today with them likely shorthanded?
So I think I'm a little less convicted in Andre Drummond minutes. I'm also just less convicted in Clingan minutes in general. So I don't know how much they'll actually have to stay big. Portland's been perfectly fine going smaller. They have actual depth there with Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson, guys they can go to that they feel better about than Clingan. We've seen that a bunch. So I'm not it's hard for me to ever be totally convicted that Andre Drummond is going to have a big minute floor. Obviously, the fact that Yabu is, if they're shorthanded, more likely to play at the power forward spot does create a pretty big void there. Bone, I would still expect to be involved, but yeah, they're probably going to have to use Drummond a decent bit. I'm going to actually, so we don't usually do this, but I'm going to release, I didn't put this on our docs for John to bring up during the edge portion. So we're going to go with our first released play prior to projections being released, I think, of all time. I don't think we've ever done this before. This is the first time this has ever happened. So and we talked about the Tyrese Maxey thing, the finger issue. He's apparently trying to shoot with 3 fingers. So apparently Nick Nurse is working with Maxey on shooting, I think, jump shots with 3 fingers. The fact that that's even a thing is kind of crazy. Apparently Maxey is the one who is like pushing to play through this injury. Kind of crazy given like where the Sixers are in general, but it's obviously impacting his, perimeter shooting more than anything else. We've seen him in a couple of the recent games not really get many of them up. I think he's attempted 2 threes in like 2 of his last 4 or 3 games. It hasn't been great there. He had an 0 for 10 performance from deep. So yeah, the first release play we're going to go with here before projections come out, first ever time we've ever done this, is Tyrese Maxey under 3.5 threes. I'm not actually looking at the current prices, but I think anything to like minus 180 I'd be okay with. Just generally very skeptical. Obviously I know that the fact that Oubre and George, their potential absences are looming. I think that's likely that it happens. So I'm kind of like looking at a set of projections with both of them out when I'm kind of going through this. But we did cut the Maxey 3-point rate a little bit, which I think makes sense just given the issues he's dealing with. So even though the Sixers are shorter, Paul George obviously big usage guy, same with Kelly Oubre. Maxey's playing time isn't going to change. We already have him projected for a shitload of minutes. The guys that are kind of stepping in, like they are going to have, we're going to see more Ricky Council, some Lonnie Walker. Like in terms of usage, like it's really not that different with like a guy like Kelly Oubre at least. When we see like somebody like Council, like Council's not afraid to get a shot up. Neither is Lonnie Walker. Obviously, Paul George's absence a little bit more felt in that area, especially when you have a guy like Yabu stepping into that role, who's not like terribly offensive minded. We saw him kind of have a nice game the other night, seeing more run at power forwards, and maybe he replicates that again. But yeah, so yeah, we like the Maxey just kind of shorting his potential to shoot from deep. Don't hate the idea of potentially trying to just lean into the points under in general. Kind of accounting for the fact that he's having trouble from deep. But would prefer the 3-point angle to that, just given I think there is a chance that his point prop could come up depending on how this news shakes out. I think the 3 you could potentially get some, you could potentially find a better price in the 3s, as this injury news kind of shakes out, given where we think it's going to go. So you could try to wait on this if you want to try to maybe get a better price. But I do think the market is going to catch up at some point to like the Maxey kind of shooting issues sooner rather than later. So yeah, that's our first ever release play, 14 minutes for projections drop for premium members at least. So yeah.
Portland's been a sneaky bad matchup too. Tough matchup rather. Top 10 defense the last 10 games. Top 4, 3-point attempts for opponents in that time span as well. So I think you have a few more outs as well, just aside from just the finger narrative.
Yeah, and especially if they're shorthanded without Paul George and Oubre, it really condenses things on Tyrese Maxey. And there's one clear guy on the Blazers that you don't want to deal with, and it's Toumani Camara. And Toumani Camara would be for sure the primary defender on Tyrese Maxey if they are shorthanded. Really no one else you need to stop. Obviously, Quentin Grimes, put up 44 on Saturday, but obviously, Camara would be on Maxey primarily. So let's move on to Sacramento. Domantas Sabonis out at least a week with a hamstring strain. He got hurt about a minute in last game, so we kind of have like a full game of what they look like, and what that means is a lot of Jonas Valanciunas at center. So Valanciunas played 30 minutes on Saturday with Domas out. He should play upper 20s here. I think his realistic range is probably 26 to 30. We have him at 28 currently. This is a team in Sacramento that just does not have a lot of depth right now. They were already condensing things a lot under the previous coaching regime. And Doug Christie really doesn't have a choice here if with Domas out. I mean, you have guys in there like Markelle Fultz, who's been playing a couple minutes here and there. They're going to have to play some Isaac Jones. single-digit minutes as well. But beyond those guys, it's not great. I mean, they're looking at, Keon Ellis, LaRavia, Trey Lyles, who has gotten up there for sure. But this is a spot. The point that I want to make is the minutes floor on their main three guys is exceptionally high in Malik Monk, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. So we saw DeMar DeRozan in that game on Saturday when Domas got hurt. He played 40 minutes. I think that's well within reason for him again today. Like I said, they just don't have that depth anymore without Domas. Domas has been a big minutes eater for that team. And Trey Lyles, he had stretches earlier this season where he was getting up there in minutes, like low 20s, mid 20s. Even with Domas out on Saturday, he only played 17 minutes. So that just creates a really high floor for DeRozan. Out of these three, Malik Monk, most favorable matchup today. But LaVine and DeRozan well within, consideration, just given they both have legit 40-minute upside in this spot. Any general thoughts here on the Kings without Domas? Their offense obviously looks a little different. SBK, I'll toss to you first.
Yeah, so I think there's two kind of pretty clear winners here. One is obvious. One is, I think, should be fairly obvious, but maybe is not. So obviously Jonas Valanciunas is going to step into a big role. I think the floor for playing time for him is fairly high. We saw, I think, about 30 minutes from him in the last game with Sabonis left after a minute. So we pretty much got a full kind of look at what that looked like. We did see Keon Ellis, though, take a nice step forward. He played almost 28 minutes. You mentioned how short they are just in general. They're already playing Malik Monk, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray a ton of minutes. You would have to think Valanciunas obviously steps into a good chunk of what Sabonis leaves behind. But that I still think there's a 5-6 minute hole at least on most nights. Sabonis is generally good, just plays a ton, plays all the time. Doesn't generally tend to leave games. So I think that extra 5-6 minutes, it could go to Isaac Jones. I think that's definitely possible. And I think especially if they need size, he's a guy that could get involved. I think they're probably fine having Trey Lyles eat up most of those non-center minutes. But I think Keon Ellis is really going to be the main non-Valanciunas winner in terms of this injury. I think his floor for playing time gets a little bit higher. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see him kind of in the mid-20s. Instead of the low 20s, as long as Sabonis is out. And I do think there's going to be some games where he ends up could end up 30-plus minutes, especially if Jake LaRavia is not getting more involved. I think he's another option to potentially play a little bit more. But if they're not going to use more LaRavia and they're not going to use Isaac Jones, I think Keon Ellis is a really nice ceiling. And we'll get into a Keon Ellis-related prop in a little bit.
Yeah, the last thing I want to mention here on Sacramento with Valanciunas especially is the matchup could not be better. And you look at the other side of the ball, Moses Brown, his 10-day expired. The Mavs are not allowed to sign him to another because they're hard capped. So you look at who Dallas will be running out at center today. It's a combination of Kessler Edwards, Dwight Powell, Kai Jones, and Omax Prosper. So a very undersized group full of fours too that are having to play five because they're without Gafford and Lively and were unable to bring back Moses Brown. So just matchup wise, a very good spot for Valanciunas today against Dallas. Let's move on to Houston. A ton of Q tags here. Fred VanVleet's still out. Wouldn't be surprising if he missed more time. Beat writers are speculating would be another game or two for him. He re-aggravated that ankle issue that sidelined him for a little bit. But yeah, they have a very busy injury report today. Amen Thompson, Alperen Şengün, Dylan Brooks, Tari Eason, Steven Adams. Worth noting, this is the first leg of a back-to-back for the Rockets. They play in Indy tomorrow. So I think this is at OKC, at Indy back-to-back. NBA TV game. The speculation from one of the main Rockets beat writers this morning was that he expected Amen, Şengün, and Dylan Brooks to all likely play tonight, and for some combination of those guys to sit tomorrow in Indy. So that's kind of the loose assumption that we're operating at under. The Tari Eason and Steven Adams group, it kind of makes sense a little bit for them to be staggered. We know both those guys will not play both legs of the back-to-back. They'll sit one of them just due to injury management. So we'll know, obviously, if Tari plays today, he'll sit tomorrow, and vice versa. Same with Steven Adams. So want to get to Houston stuff initially. Obviously, 3 big questionable tags here with Amen, Şengün, and Dylan Brooks. We're seeing Jabari Smith Jr. Starting today, regardless, just because Van Vliet's out. But you look at who would fill in those minutes. I think it's going to be more of a by committee. If multiple of those guys are out, you're looking at Aaron Holiday, Cam Whitmore, Jayshawn Tate, Jeff Green, Jock Landale. None of these guys really excite you too much. A little Reed Shepard in there as well. I think they're going to kind of fill it, like I said, by committee, and it's going to concentrate things a little bit more on the top end guys if they are shorthanded. So tough to really get into the Rockets too much here, just with the 3 Q tags and the uncertainty. But like I said, the assumption, just given the reporting from one of the Rockets beats that we're operating under, is that Alp, Amen, and Dylan Brooks are more likely than not to play tonight, and then have a chance to sit tomorrow. So any other thoughts here on the Rockets, SBK, before we move on?
Nah,
too many Q tags up in the air right now. Yeah, let's move it along for now.
Well, I will say, just looking at the screen, at the prop screen, one thing that's useful about it is trying to decipher which way the market's leaning. We're pretty much on market with most of the main guys here. That's with everyone in the conditional, so the base set. So that comment from the beat writer, the fact that they're catching OKC in the second leg of a back-to-back, a little bit softer matchup in an Eastern Conference matchup against the Pacers tomorrow. This game, probably you would think is a priority to roll these guys out there in the market right now. Based on our prop screen, the edges showing or lack thereof tells me that the market's leaning most of these guys in.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation to look at kind of the market where it's leaning. Obviously, like John said, the market is leaning 2 or 3 of these guys in. I think it makes sense just given the reporting. Also given the OKC injury report. We just got them this morning and only Isaiah Joe is on it. I think if OKC was resting potentially in that second leg, we're resting some combination like SGA, Chet, J-Dub, etc., Lou Dort, it maybe would have been a little bit more likely for Houston to rest one of the 3 main guys here. But just given they're at full strength, I do think it's likely that we'll see full strength Houston as a response. So one more situation to get to, or 2 more situations to get to. John Morant, Santi Aldama, questionable for Memphis. They will have Desmond Bane, Brandon Clark, and Vince Williams. So as I mentioned up top in our news alerts, we mentioned this morning a little after 12 Eastern that John Morant was present at shoot-around, but did not do any shooting drills during the portion open to media. So I think this situation is very important to be able to distinguish between like someone present at shoot-around, what it means, if it matters. This situation where we just noted it and we didn't bump John Morant's percent play at all. So net, like, yeah, he's present at shoot-around, but he didn't do any shooting drills afterwards. That for me is a bit of a negative. And, I think if you just look at the present at shoot-around report, you would think Ja is more likely to play. But with the added context for me, I think Ja is very questionable here in the second leg of a back-to-back. He has extensive history already this season of missing games in these spots when he's been questionable on the injury report. So for me, slight lean towards him sitting maybe 45%, nothing too strong to act on as of yet. But yeah, we can kind of get into what Memphis looked like. Luke Kennard has been that go-to guy for them over Scottie Pippen Jr. Starting at the point. when Jaw's been out. So we're expecting Luke Kennard to start at the point in that situation around 26 to 29 minutes. Barring any ejection, it feels like a reasonable range for Kennard with Scottie Pippen Jr. backing him up. And then more Jalen Wells, more Santi Aldama, a little bit more Vince Williams Jr. On the wing as well. Any general thoughts here on the Grizzlies if Jaw ends up sitting? Either of you guys?
No, just want to know. So the Grizzlies are not on a back-to-back. I think I said that by accident, but yeah, this is not a back-to-back for them. But yeah, I think Luke obviously pretty securely, I think, in there as a starter without, whether it's Jaw sitting when he's questionable or Bane sitting. It's Luke's kind of that next guy up. Scottie Pippen's role should grow, obviously, without Jaw. The Santi stuff is like kind of throws a wrench into the front court for sure. Like I think it certainly would improve like the upside in terms of minutes for Vince Williams, for GG Jackson. GG in particular has been like kind of up and down. So it would really help solidify his role. I think would solidify Brandon Clark to a degree. Maybe a little bit of Zach Edey as well. So I still think the Santi thing, could loom large.
Similar to the Houston situation, looking at our prop screen. I don't know if you want to share. I have the angle pulled up here.
Yeah, let me pull it up real quick.
So here's Luke Kennard's assist projection with Jaw ruled in the base set. Huge edge on the under. Like we said, we're maybe skeptical Jaw's going to be able to go. If we take Jaw out of the projections, we're pretty much right on market with Luke's assist rate or assist projection that goes up to 5.2. So this is another kind of useful, function of the prop screen is to kind of see what the market's leaning. Clearly, with the big under showing on Luke with Jaw in there, tells me the market's shading Jaw out for sure.
Yeah, and kind of want to talk a little bit about that Jaw situation if he ends up being rolled out, the repercussions. For me, the Jaren Jackson Jr. spot just gets even better. You're looking at a Hawks team that is rolling out some combination of like Mo Gay, Dominic Barlow, and some small ball like Risache at the 4 right now. They're very shorthanded. No Georges Niang today either. So the Jaren Jackson Jr. spot is amazing, and we always like to attack bigs too. So Zach Edey, good spot for him as well. Bane would obviously benefit. He would get the Dyson Daniels assignment, I would assume, if Jaw is out, which isn't great, but Bane should be able to get up to like 36, 37 minutes if Jaw is out. Like they just don't have a ton of guard depth and shot creation there. And yeah, he's kind of shown a very high floor when he has been when he has been in there, and he just got a recent game off, so he should be pretty well rested for this one as well. So some spots I kind of want to get into before we get into release is Kel'el Ware out, Andrew Wiggins questionable, Hawkins doubtful. Things get really, really thin fast for Miami. With Davion and Wiggins questionable, Kel'el Ware out. So we could be seeing a lot more Duncan Robinson, a lot more Alec Burks, a lot of Haywood Highsmith, and a big role for Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero if those guys are out. Davion and Wiggins, their questionable tags feel very iffy to me. Davion same day ad, not great either. So they could be really thin and helps us to condense things because they've been a rotation that's been very messy. But if you remove Davion and Wiggins, it gets very condensed because they don't have Kashad Johnson. They don't have Josh Christopher. They don't have some of these G League guys that can provide some depth. So it really focuses on a couple of their rotation guys quickly. And it becomes a lot easier to project. So want to spotlight that situation. And then Tobias Harris out for Detroit. We increased the minutes floors for both Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. Got him up to 30. We generally project them around 26 to 28. And then we'll see a good amount of, Ron Holland and Fontecchio at the 4, where Tobias Harris generally plays. So unless you guys have anything else, I think we're good to move on to the money-making portion of the show. We will put the edges up as you guys see. The projections are available now for premium members. And yeah, let's get into some spots, some edges that we like today.
Awesome. We have a decent sized list, given it's a Monday 7-game slate, not that big. So we already went over the maxi threes thing. There's a bunch of sets of conditionals for Philly, so it's a little bit messy to look at that. Still, obviously, a number of ways that news could shake out. Do like the Tyrese under threes. Talked about that earlier. The hand issue still looming. Still expect that to be an issue. The first one I want to go over is kind of a guy we actually let's start here. Miles Bridges turnovers. So he's been kind of all over the map in terms of turning it over. I think a lot of that. Oh wow, did those numbers come way down? I guess so.
They were pulled in some places.
There's nothing on the board. Interesting. Yeah, I think does 365 have anything up? I think they might. Yeah. So I think that 365 number's fine. Turnovers are becoming tougher to find as time goes on. So the thing with Bridges is he turns the ball over a lot more when they don't have LaMelo. I think the fact that they have LaMelo here and also have Mark Williams, two guys who are pretty involved in that offense. Obviously, LaMelo from a scoring and a distributing perspective. Mark Williams, can contribute a lot more on the offensive end than Musa generally can, or Taj Gibson used to be able to. Obviously, they have Nurkic there now, which can help a little bit there. But yeah, I think this number is just a little too high, and I think plus money at this point I think is far too friendly. Bridges has averaged 1.6 turnovers, 1.62 turnovers per 36 with LaMelo on the floor this year. It's a pretty big change from when LaMelo was not on the floor. I think that makes sense, obviously. So just given the guys that they have available, I think this is pretty solid. I think there is some blowout risk, which could potentially cut down Bridges' minutes. But yeah, anything plus money here, I think is pretty good. I've given the market a decent chunk of credit even to get to this 2.62 number. So yeah, I think this probably is even better than the value that is being shown on 365 right now. Yeah, shame that does not appear to be out many places though. So the next one I want to go to, which I think should be more widely available. We were talking about Keon Ellis. So can we go to him in the steals department? Not the first time we've talked about Keon here. He is like, I'm hesitant to call him a Dyson Light. There's really nobody quite like Dyson Daniels right now. But I think these prices are very appealing for a variety of reasons. So talked about Keon, I think, having a bigger minute ceiling than maybe we are projecting. I kind of docked down his overall steal rate a tiny bit to give the market some credit here, but at the same time, I think there is a real chance that we could end up being on the low end of his minutes. I think he is by far the safest bench option that they have in terms of playing. So if anybody gets in any sort of foul trouble, anybody gets gets banged up, maybe they want to go away from Valanciunas. Like Keon is the next guy up, I think, no matter what happens, pretty much. And I think in this particular spot, he should be very needed with, the clearest path to Dallas scoring points is through Kyrie Irving. So I think the fact that having Keon out there to help on the perimeter in this matchup with, them generally having, Zach LaVine, Malik Monk, no disrespect to those guys, but they're not Keon on the defensive end. And I think that they will make a point to get him in there to help defensively. And I don't think they're really going to have to make a point to do it. Like Justin talked about how short they are generally, how much they were pushing some of these starters while they still had Domantas Sabonis. So losing that, not really having, I don't think they have a clear identity behind Valanciunas right now. Like I'm not sold Isaac Jones plays minutes. The gun to my head, I would say he does not. And they have Trey Lyles play the backup center role. And then, more Keon. I think they're much more likely to want to play Keon in this spot than try to get somebody like Isaac Jones in there, which is another reason why I think we could be a little bit light on the minutes and why this in reality could actually be a little bit better than even this edge is showing now. So yeah, 25 minutes. I think any of these plus money prices are pretty good. I do think there's a good chance that he plays more than that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to come up a minute on Keon right now. I will take the bet that Isaac Jones plays, but I do think I agree this matchup with Kyrie and needing his defense, Keon's defense makes sense where, I do think 25 feels a little low where I could see like 26 and a half. for us in this spot pretty easily, just given how thin they are. Like we do have these nominal Markelle Fultz minutes as well. So if they really want to kind of condense things, Keon would be one of the first guys they would do it with.
Yeah, like I do think they're likely to try to get somebody else involved, whether it's like Fultz for a couple minutes or Jones. But yeah, Keon got to about 28 in that last game with, Spones just playing like a minute. I think that's like a fairly, I think expecting 28 is a little bit on the higher end of realistic expectation. But yeah, I do think 26, 27 kind of makes a tiny bit more sense just given the opponent and just kind of just generally how short they are. I want to get this one over with because I'm going to feel like an idiot like talking about it the entire time. Steph Curry, 3-point field goals. I want to just do this as quickly as possible. Hopefully nobody like screen record this or anything and have me talking about this publicly. I do have interest in Steph Curry under threes. I think Dr. 5.5s are okay. Even if you got to lay some juice, scary as that is. I do expect, so a few things here. I've given the Warriors more credit for just being I expect them to shoot more threes with Jimmy, which kind of doesn't necessarily make sense, I think, on the surface, but I think their ball movement has been a little bit better. And it just seems like, just relative to the market, we were kind of under a good bit on a lot of these Warriors guys. So I've given them, I think, more credit than they maybe deserve, just in terms of 3-point makes. Like it's a good bit higher than I would have generally expected. Charlotte, not a bad spot for it, but I think they know who Steph Curry is. I think they're going to make somewhat of a point to try to, get the ball out of his hands a little bit. Not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do. But yeah, while Jimmy is not really a 3-point shooter himself, I do think he makes life easier on a lot of the guys who do shoot threes, Steph included. But I just think this number is a little too inflated. I think that DraftKings number, even at 4.5 plus 124, is pretty good. I think he'll have to be pretty efficient or get 12, 13, 14 attempts up from deep, which could happen. But making 6 of these is easy.
So I think the best path here for him to go under is the minutes downside. And obviously we factor that in already with the 31.5 minute projection. We're generally at like 33 and a half for Steph in a competitive game. And we've taken him back here to 31.5 to bake that in. This is a deeper team now with Jimmy Butler in there. They do have some options, especially in the blowout unit with Spencer. They aren't even playing Buddy Hield that much these days with Pods taking the lion's share of those off-guard minutes. But we saw, not too long ago, like a week ago, they played Charlotte. They blew them out by 36 points, and Steph only played 24 minutes there. The game before that, they were at home against Dallas, won by 24. Steph only played 28 and a half minutes there. So I think the path here that intrigued me the most, the matchup's really good against Charlotte. They're barely an NBA team at this point. More of a team with LaMelo and Bridges in there, but the path here that we want to look at is like minutes downside. That would be the angle that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, for sure. It's just a big number. Like I think he generally is going to have to play a fairly full amount. I mean, Steph Curry is the best shooter of all time. Like if he sinks this and if he goes 6 of 9 or something, like would I be shocked by that? Absolutely not. But I think the number is just a tad inflated given, the math. I think it's just there's a little bit of value here. It's scary, obviously, but I think it is good. You talked about Buddy Hield, so I want to get into a Buddy Hield.
One more note to add on Steph Curry. This is the first leg of a back-to-back for the Warriors. Kerr has talked about limiting the minutes of Steph. So this is a spot where I like a little bit more the minutes downside there because they are at MSG tomorrow in a game on TNT that they're going to have to probably push Steph 34 minutes for. So another kind of feather in the cap of like potential minutes downside for Steph in this spot.
Yeah, I love it. So can we go to steals for, you mentioned Buddy Hield, hasn't had the most secure role. Jimmy back, I don't think that's going to be any more secure than it would be otherwise. Have these all gotten taken down? No, all right. They're still there. Yeah, I think you might have like your best line, like a lot of these books not in like the best line settings or something.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, so I think any of these prices for Buddy under a half a steal are good. Not a lot to really talk about here. I mean, he's averaging about 0.9 per game this season. Expecting his playing time to dip a little bit here. Getting plus 145 is just, I think, a little bit too good. Buddy's not like any kind of a defensive menace or anything. Has been pretty good in terms of like steal per minute rate this season with Golden State, which is a little odd, just given he's older and maybe he's playing with better defenders. I think maybe that is potentially helping. But yeah, don't expect that to really be a thing that continues. And I just think that the prices we're getting on this under are a little bit too good to pass up. I have given the Warriors team a lot of credit from a steals perspective in this matchup, more than I expected to have to. So yeah, I don't think we're light on like the team steals by any means, and still showing a decent size under here. I think if anything, we are too high on the team steals number. It did kind of shock me where I ended up to have to get on market on some of these guys. Still couldn't do it with Buddy. So I think that any of those prices are very intriguing. Staying with steals, Tim Hardaway Jr. So this is one that has popped up quite a bit over the course of the season. At least when I had some outs for some of these markets early in the season, it was treating me well. So he is just, the thing with Detroit is Tobias is not like, he's not a very, crafty defender, not racking up many steals himself. A lot of the guys that I think will replace him are better at that. So I do think it makes sense to expect Detroit in general in this matchup to record a lot more steals than they generally would. Alsar is going to play a little bit more. They're going to have more guys like Ron Holland, Malik Beasley, who are just kind of better at recording steals than Tobias is. So I've given the Detroit team a lot of credit for this matchup, and still can't really get there on Tim Hardaway. I think he's one of the few guys that doesn't really see any sort of meaningful bump in that regard. I think obviously with more Thompson out there, he's the guy that is likely going to benefit in that regard. If Beasley plays more, I would expect his general upside for steals to improve, but just not really expecting that for Tim Hardaway. I think these lines for whatever reason, I expect him to be a different type of defender in this matchup, which I don't expect with Tobias out. He's not going to be the point of attack guy. That's still Alsar. So just generally confused as to why the mark seems to be thinking that his defensive upside is a lot higher. I can't really find a reason to get there. So any of these prices I think are good on Hardaway. Do think he has a higher minute floor and ceiling given the absence of Tobias for sure. But the extra 2 or 3 minutes I don't think make up for the just general bump in the price for him to record a steal. I think it's a little ttoo inflated. So yeah, any of those unders I think are good. And the last one we can go to is I think probably the thinnest of this group so far. But oh man, I'm going to try to say this name right this first time. Tajane Salon. All right, Tajane Salon. Takes a lot to get that one right for me. So if we go to just the PRA thing frame, I'm kind of curious. Doesn't look like there's going to be much there. I think. Potentially on BetMGM, does look like the Bet Online number came down a little bit. There's something there. I think the 10.5s are still appealing. Pretty much fine with any of those. I would not play the Flip under 9.5 or Bovada. I think that price is okay. I don't like the Flip price. I think the Bovada price at 9.5 is okay. But that's about a stopping point. I think that Bovada price is about as low as I'd go. Not a whole lot there. He's just I think the one thing, the big driving factor in this one is the rebounds. And I think a lot of that is because, Salon had some pass to playing some center minutes, a little bit earlier in the last few weeks. But now that they have, they added Jusuf Nurkic, obviously. They have Mark Williams healthy. They have Moussa Diabate. They have centers. They're going to play those with that combination of guys 48 minutes. That kind of, I think, eats heavily into the Salon's rebounding upside. We kind of played that under the other day. That got home pretty safely. The rebound prop has come down. We are still showing some value just on that alone. Also fine just going in that direction. I think that's the biggest driving factor of this, having value in the first place. So fine with that. But yeah, I think the PRI under is fine as well at 10.5 or at that Bovada price, minus 103 on the under.
Yeah, I want to emphasize this one particularly with Salon should be very price sensitive because I think it's a little thin. What we talked about with Steph before with the blowout downside, the inverse applies for Salon. Every single one of the blowouts that the Hornets have been involved in, he's been in at the very end. He benefits from blowout risk. So you look at the string of blowouts that they had at Sacramento, at Portland, at Denver, at Orlando, 23, 23, 24, 20 minutes. That's above the 18 that we have them at today. So I do think you want to be particularly price sensitive with this one, just because I could see paths for him easily if this one gets out of hand for him to play 19, 20, 21 minutes and benefit from the blowout.
Yeah, for sure. I think even if we got to like 19, he's just like not much of a rates guy. That's like I think the reason that the rebounds could be this like the most appealing thing to play for him is because like I'm not really expecting Gold State. Like I think they should win this game fairly comfortably. I could see that being like the one area where even if he does play more, like that uptick might not be felt as much. Just given that he's still going to be playing with a center, I think that regardless of whether the game's competitive or not. So yeah, I do echo what Justin said there. I think there is a little bit of risk, sure, and there is some upside for him if the game gets ugly. But he's just not like a super involved player on the offensive end. He's just kind of like a spot up shooter. So generally needs like another chunk of minutes usually for it to make much of a difference. But yeah, fine with just the under 3.5 rebounds too. If you're kind of just concerned about the general minute upside in a blowout, I think there's less risk with the rebound under than with the PRA under. I think that's about all we have. Do we have any?
Yeah, I'll pull up some questions. We had a question about Bane over 5.5 assists. Obviously, that's contingent on Jaw status, but want to flip to the conditional with Jaw out and take a look at how that edge, manifests. Obviously, we talked about Kennard and Pippen Jr. Would be picking up all those point guard minutes, but Bane has shown a sizable assist rate bump in these spots before. So kind of want to get your guys' thoughts. We had a question about Bane over 5.5 assists.
I think that what you mentioned earlier about Jaren Jackson and like the upside for him makes it a little bit more appealing for me. I do think it is a really nice spot for Jaren, especially without Ja. So I think, if you can potentially get this in that time, like if Ja's ruled out, you can potentially get this in that time frame between when, the news hits here and when the books adjust to it. I think you're probably going to be doing pretty well. Do like the upside for Jaren, I guess, who would probably be Bane's most consistent assist recipient. So yeah, would have no issue with that. One last thing, I talked about this in the last show, didn't really touch on it much earlier. If you like just using the search, just want to shout out like Justin and John for the unbelievable work they do on the news feed. If you're like a little on the fence of whether or not to get this product, if you're like considering the projections angle, just news alone, I guarantee you, or I would bet my life that this subscription will pay for itself in just like the amount of CLV you'll get on props that you can kind of react to before they come down, the amount of CLV you can get on mainline spreads and totals as news kind of breaks here. Even in that, like, even if there's only a 10, 15, 20 second difference, and there's not differences every time, but I think, a lot of the time we're a little bit quicker, and that 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds can mean a ton. Can give you opportunity to get down on things that you otherwise would not if you're kind of using any other news source. And getting that sort of like being able to get like props in before that kind of things readjust based on injury news, not the best for account health, but in terms of like your expected value, it's phenomenal. Same thing with like, spreads and totals on news stuff. Like you don't even necessarily need to hold positions if you're able to, like, you don't necessarily need to take a stand. You could see injury news here, play a particular side or total and end up buying back on the other side after things move if you kind of know, how impactful the players are. So just like aside from the projections, just want to shout out like how amazing this news service is. I think because it's not like public, we just kind of do it in a Discord. It gets a little bit overlooked. But just as somebody who consumes this every day, it's an unbelievable product just from that angle aside, even just ignoring projections, ignoring live streams. The value I think you can get just from this news is unbelievably massive. And I think it's our biggest selling point that we don't probably talk about enough.
For sure. Yeah, just kind of wrapping a bow on that, have done the public news feed twice at Fantasy Labs and Underdog. I think for us, it just makes a lot more sense to keep it private for our members only. We'll guarantee, given my track record doing this, that this will be the fastest, most consistent news you'll get. No fluff. You won't get updates on Daquan Jeffries for tomorrow or anything like that, or any kind of filler noise stuff. Every single one will hit. And then we really kind of focus on the build up too, like getting out ahead of it. So percent play, we'll update that, over the course of up until tip off, with leans, with new information, get out ahead of it, minutes, limits, etc. And yeah, we'll let the subs kind of speak for it itself. I think we do kind of like to keep it a little under wraps, have it be our kind of secret weapon, because a lot of times we're getting out lineups, 5-10 minutes before they're public, and we're able to move on it, and our members are able to benefit. And then we kind of like it that way, where we're not giving the stuff out for free on a public Twitter feed. So a couple other questions we'll get to real quick. We got like 5 minutes before we got to get back into the lab, but Scoot Henderson over 2.5 turnovers was mentioned. Want to go over there and take a look at Portland.
I do think that's okay. There's not a ton there, I don't think. I generally, like, if I'm playing an over like this, I generally want a little bit more, I think, especially on like kind of an ancillary stat category. But do think there's some paths to Scoot playing even more than the playing time we have projected for him. Like I mentioned, like how comfortable it does seem like the Blazers are to go small. They're likely to be starting Shaedon Sharpe here, so like it kind of makes the path for Scoot, I think, playing time a bit more simple with Grant out. I think it is a lot tied to Klingon, though. It's tied to like how much he can stay on the floor and how much that they can actually play like with a traditional center out there. So they're not using Klingon, and they're not using Jabari Walker. I keep calling him Jabari Parker for some reason. But if they're not using Jabari Walker and they're not using Klingon, like Scoot is that next guy up, kind of like they're comfortable playing small. They'll roll Denny Avdia to 5 or Chris Murray, whatever. I think that they've shown they're at least comfortable enough with that, that makes me feel pretty good that there could be some additional upside for Scoot even beyond like kind of where we have right now. I think you're still muted.
Before we get out here, producer Tom, we want to kind of put up the results of our plays from last show, if you're able to. Hit on 3 of the 4. Chris can't shoot done. Yeah. One of our favorites. And then, yeah, Cade, I think was, Cade and Asar were 2 that we talked about a lot, just with Cade in that matchup. And Asar just being on ball more. His minutes have ticked up as of late. He's playing like 24-26. So we'll hope to replicate this again. And if we go 0 for 4, God forbid, we will show the results on our next stream and be accountable for our misses as well as our mix. So we're going to go back to the lab now. We have a lot of kind of news to set up for. We'll get Utah projections up shortly with the Colin Sexton conditional right after we get off here. And yeah, appreciate you guys hanging with us, all your questions. We will be back same time Wednesday and Friday. For our members, we will be in the alpha chats the rest of the way, answering questions, identifying edges, and talking about news, sweating these bets maybe a little later as well. But yeah, appreciate everybody hanging with us. We will see you guys on Wednesday. Let's have a good day.
You know the crowd is ready. Get ready.